Wandering Winder here, continuing my series on openings with some of the new cards from Allies. Some very interesting stuff going on here. So, first one of these that we're going to look at is, if I can get it pop up, Herb Gatherer, or perhaps you would pronounce it Herb Gatherer, or perhaps you would pronounce it some other way, but I'm going to call it Herb Gatherer, I think. Um, so it has this kind of interesting thing. You have to discard your deck, and then, well, I say discard your deck. You're not discarding your deck, you're putting your deck into your discard pile, which would matter for things like Village Green. Anyway, um, which this doesn't trigger. Uh, you get to look through then your discard pile and play a treasure from it, and then you can rotate this pile. Um, yeah, I think in my original reaction to this video, this didn't seem all that exciting to me, and particularly in the opening, right? Because what targets is it going to have to hit? Now, with some exceptions, right? Like if there's a goat, this could be a way to play your goat more often, and great. But it didn't seem that exciting to me. I thought as an opening, it's probably not very good. However, someone has pointed out, probably many people have pointed out, that if this is the only plus buy on board, which it isn't because there's trade route, but in a given board, there's a non-trivial chance it's the only plus buy. Um, then if you open with it and then play it and rotate the pile, you basically, if your opponent doesn't also get the Herb Gatherer, you can lock your opponent out of getting plus buy. Well, I was still not super convinced by this, although I thought did bear some consideration. Just because I don't usually want to open Ruined Market. Now this card is better than Ruined Market, but how much? Hence this video. How good is opening Herb Gatherer? So presumably I'm not going to open Herb Gatherer without having a good treasure in my deck that's better than copper, which most of the time is going to have to be silver. So what I'm going to look for is just the Herb Gatherer Silver opening today. But there's still a lot to go over here. So let's go ahead and open Herb Gatherer Silver. Now, yeah, like normal, you can hit 5 on turn 3, on turn 4 with your silver, whatever. You can also find your Herb Gatherer. Now, because the Herb Gatherer won't always have wow, that probably sounds like it was an audio stutter, but it was actually just my brain. Um, anyway, because it's not always going to have a good target, this is seemingly not so reliable at hitting your price points as silver is. But at least if the price point you're going for is 5, which is the most common price point you're trying to hit, then Herb Gatherer Silver, if you think about it, the only way that Silver could hit 5 and Herb Gatherer Silver wouldn't would be in the exact hand of Silver, Herb Gatherer, Copper, Estate, right? And moreover, um, there's a couple of caveats to that as well, right? So, first of all, you would need the other hand to also not hit 5, uh, which is fairly likely in that particular case, right? A random hand in your deck from Herb Gatherer's Silver opening, you're 2.65% to draw on a random hand, the Silver Herb Gatherer Copper Estate hand. And then the only way you miss the next turn is if your hand is, or the other hand is 4 coppers and an estate exactly, because there's only one estate left, and that's that's going to happen 1.9% of the overall time. So, right, most of the time, a little more than 2/3, like something like 70% of the time, that that you have that Silver Herb Gatherer Copper Estate, it's going to be paired with that 4 copper and an estate hand, and it's going to be Sad Trombone, but it's still less than 2% of the overall, right? Less than 2% of the overall. Except it could be mirrored, but here's the other caveat, right? Oh, you could have the 4 coppers first. So the other caveat is whenever you play the Herb Gatherer, you get to the bottom of a shuffle. So I'm not going to have overall total numbers here because 5/12 of the time you're shuffling on turn 3, and then it really depends what you bought on turn 3 as to what you can do. But the other caveat is when you don't shuffle on turn 3, and the hand where you would be missing, which is 4 coppers and an estate into Silver Herb Gatherer Copper Estate, if you buy a silver on turn 3 there, then the Herb Gatherer can pick up a silver, right? So in that exact example where you have 4 coppers and an estate as your turn 3 hand, which happens fairly often, right? Like 13.3% of the time. It's one of the more common hands that you could see on turn 3 here. 1/7 of those cases will your turn 4 hand be Silver Herb Gatherer Copper Estate. And that's that same like 1.9% of the overall, but it's 1/7 at that point, right? Once you see that turn 3 hand of 4 coppers and an estate, 1/7 of the time you're going to miss in a way that you can repair if you buy silver on turn 3, which, given that this is what you're opening, the silver is probably a pretty reasonable card. Otherwise, you would have opened with the 4 cost or what have you. So it's actually pretty small risk compared to silver, at least, to open Silver Herb Gatherer. The other thing is sometimes shuffling on turn 3 can be really good for you. If you if you hit 5 on turn 3 and play your Herb Gatherer, then you have a chance of, well, basically you're just faster at getting to that 5 cost, right? You could play it as soon as turn 4. So let's look at some of the math for that. The math for that is you've got a 30% chance of hitting 5 on turn 3 and having that Herb Gatherer. So 30% is not bad to be heading into a shuffle with your 5 cost. If you want to talk about playing it turn 4 exactly, which is faster than you could have without the Herb Gatherer, then it's right, like 5/13 of that 30%, or a hair over 11.5% of the overall times, you're going to be able to play a 5 cost on turn 4 by opening Silver Herb Gatherer. So there's some definite advantages here to opening with the Herb Gatherer. You also have an 11.6% chance of having the Herb Gatherer turn 3 and not hitting 5, which is probably not very good for you, but because you have the Herb Gatherer, maybe it's not that bad because you can maybe shuffle faster again. So I think the downside there tends to be lower. But the overall picture here is if this is the only plus buy on the board, and plus buy seems like it's valuable, and there isn't something else that's just fantastic to do, then it's a very reasonable opening to open Herb Gatherer Silver. And even sometimes besides that, it's not a crazy thing to open anyway because of that kind of Chancellor effect. So yeah, and you know, if you're going to be getting other treasures later anyway, and such, it's not the craziest thing to open. Obviously, the biggest downside is this thing's a terminal, and it's not fantastic. It's like a replacement for a silver, which is not a fantastic opening. So yeah, if there's other better stuff, do look for that. You know, if there's a good thinner or something. If you can't open it with silver because there's some other card, be skeptical of that. But compared to silver, a lot of the time you will want to go for this. And if it's the only plus buy, it probably is something to watch out for. Yeah. Last thing is if you hit 6 on turn 3 off of not having the Herb Gatherer, right? So that means exactly silver, copper, 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 copper. Um, in that case, you could think about buying gold so that you can Herb Gatherer into it on turn 4 if you're greedy. Now, how good is that? Well, if that's your turn 3 hand, right? This estate was a copper. You would be 5/7 to draw the Herb Gatherer here, right? So that's a little over 70%. If you draw the Herb Gatherer here, um, you can still miss 5 if all 3 estates are in your hand with that Herb Gatherer. So if you're trying to hit 5 again, you're 1/5 to miss 5 even with the Herb Gatherer in your next hand. And then your additional 2/7 to miss 5. Well, 1/5 of the 5/7, your additional 2/7 to miss if you just don't draw the Herb Gatherer. So overall, you're only 4/7 to hit 5 if this turn 3 you would buy gold. So it is a pretty big risk. You would actually need the gold to be quite a good card, usually, to go for it. Probably wouldn't recommend it on most boards, but I mean, if you're trying to play to get lucky, I don't know. If the gold is good, you could try to go for that. It is a bit of a greed play, but you could try for it. Just not usually recommended. Anyway, that's it for this video. Thanks for watching.